All right. Okay, so welcome to everyone. So at the moment we have few people is currently connected. So welcome to the fourth pack meetup. Yes, it's the fourth one. And yes, we are back again. And yes, we are going to talk about performance again. And thanks for everyone to following us so far. So I think it's pretty awesome to have a large install-based community that take time every Wednesday to connect either very early for those living like Scots in Australia or New Zealand. So it's quite early morning meeting for you guys. And for the European ones, I would say thanks for connecting late after probably after dinner or after beer. It's a beer time. In fact. So today we have a special theme. So the theme that we are going to discuss today has been submitted by Ganesh. The theme is it makes story sense. It's something I always wanted to discuss is how can we bring the business dimension in our reports, because mainly most of the time we're talking about very deep dive technical metrics and sometimes, and I think a technical community understand quite well, but when you go out of that community, then suddenly you're heading a big wall where nobody is understanding you. So yeah, the idea is that let's figure out an approach or a way where we could gather some business metrics and sort of correlate them to our numbers. So then we will be more easier. It will be easier for us, for a non-technical person, to understand our performance and load testing results. Otherwise, we talked about it last week during the pack meetup number 3. One of the biggest dimension that is required to make good performance engineer is communication. So exposing our metrics, making our metrics understandable. This is really an important part. So here it makes sense. We are here to discuss about it. So one of the part of the communication layer that we mentioned have to be mentioned today. And also, before I introduce my good friends that will be helping me to resolve that question, I just want to remind that our game is still on. Every pack meetup that will happen in the next following weeks will have the same format where you are the one that will pick the theme. So one of my colleague Margot, which is I see her connected, but she's quite shy. She doesn't want to show her face like Stefan. So she's going to push the link to where you can submit your theme. And remember, we will pick one of the theme that you've posted tonight, and we will select it tomorrow. So potentially you can win a 50 euros Amazon gift cards. So if you want to win 50 euros, don't hesitate to push your theme. Of course, it needs to make a theme related to performance. Don't try to push anything about what will be the best content to watch on Netflix in the next following weeks. We want to discuss about it at the next pack meetup. All right, so today with us, we have several pack members and friends of ours connected. So we have Luca Cabrera from Moviri Akamas. So he is live from Italy. So hey, Luca, how are you?
Everything is great here, let's say.
Yeah, lockdown like everyone.
Yeah.
We have now Scott Stevens that has been with us since the first pack meetup, and it's great to have you on board back. What's the time, Scott?
It's just gone 7 o'clock, so this is still my second coffee.
So this is
very
the
early
right
in the
moment.
morning here.
So the pack meetup is a right moment to see people drinking beer in one end of the part of the world, and another end where the people is drinking coffee. So it's pretty awesome. Thanks, Scott. We have Alan. So Alan, how are you?
Great, thanks. How are you?
Very good. So Alan was with us in Chamonix the last pack Chamonix bring performance to the top. So it's great to have you back, Alan. So how is your life going on at the moment?
Busy always. A lot of performance testing. Keeps me busy, and my son takes care of the rest with Nintendo Switch games. So that's about it.
At least he is doing something. That's better than just sitting on the couch and watching Netflix all day. So we have the winner of the last pack meetup, Ganesh, that submitted the theme. So hi Ganesh, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. In Zurich, lockdown.
Like everyone. So how is Zurich at the moment?
It's good. People are responsible, maintaining the social distance. So it's recovering fast.
Perfect. We have also a good friend of ours that has been in the pack many times now. That's Jonathan Wright. So hi, Jonathan. How are you? So how is things going on your end?
Yeah, no, really good. Really busy, but in a good way. I've been working with the guys at MIT all afternoon, so we've got some exciting stuff to talk about.
Cool. I'm just eager to get more details on this for sure. We have my good ragu teacher, the one that is able to cook pasta more better than anyone else here in this pack meetup. I mean, Luca, sorry, I know that you do pretty well as well. So it's Andrea Gallo. So Andrea, it's good to have you again.
Hey, nice to be back. Can we change introduction next time?
Should I mention
No,
the skis, the small skis, or
yeah, it's okay. That sounds better.
So how is Boston? Is it snowing? Is it normal weather or?
No, now it's actually fine. It has been snowing. I think last week. No, actually, Friday I woke up with like 2 inches of snow outside the window. So that was a change.
Yeah, for sure. Imagine that. We have our good friend Senor Performo that is currently today fully aligned with bacon and eggs. So how was your breakfast with bacon and eggs today, Leandro?
As usual, it was greasy and delicious. Enjoying a lot here the lockdown with very good dishes and motives. Very happy to be back at another talk in this PAC cafe for me.
And I see that you have a mic, which is whoa! It reminds me. I don't know if you know. There's a YouTube channel called NPR Music. For those who are not aware of this channel, I would recommend to look at it. It's a live concert in a library, and they use those microphones. So I'm pretty amazed at the microphone that you're currently using, Leandro. Again, you have a lot of great toys.
We got a new toy for this type of presentations and to improve the audio so that we sound as best as possible.
All right, so everyone is here, and we have a special person connected. I can see him. He just mentioned something in the chat. Let me grab him, and then we can start. So we have Keith Lefrançois, which is one of the guys working at Neotys. He's helping us to handle customers. So Keith, it's great to have you on board. So Keith, how are you?
I'm doing great here in North America.
I guess you're in the same, quite almost close to our good friend Andrea, I think.
Yeah, I'm closer to Cape Cod, but a little bit away from the snow.
Lucky you.
Yeah, we got like maybe a quarter of an inch of slush. That's about all we got.
Okay.
Otherwise, we have lots of pack members connected, but I heard that they were more connected in the listener mode. So we have Joey Hendricks. Joey, great to have you on board again. Stain again, you're here. That's great. So we have a lot of good, and also Alexander Podelko. I see that he's connected. By the way, Alexander is currently moderating and organizing an event called LTB, Load Testing and Benchmarking 2020. So if you didn't have the chance to connect, I would recommend to have a look at it. It's a great conference and you can learn a lot of great things. All right, without waiting, let's start the meetup. And also just remind you, this time, I will try to keep it to the hour. So I know that we are all passionate and we want to go further to 1 hour and 30 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever. But tonight, we're going to try to keep to 60 minutes. So it's currently at the clock. It's 9:08. So it means we have 52 minutes to talk about the theme. So without waiting, when I had that, I saw the theme that Ganesh posted last week. I thought it was bringing a lot of interest. I always wanted to figure out, and I think it makes sense, especially for the retailer market. It will be, I think with the help of systems like Google Analytics or others, pretty sure that we can look and track the conversion rates that we are observing in production, and maybe extrapolate, saying, oh, if you are pushing this release to production, we probably have this conversion rate. So I know it's extrapolation, it's not precise, it's not real measurement, but I think it could be a KPI that some of the decision makers that are around us could understand, and basically block a release if the conversion rate that we are providing from this release is very, very, very low. So I'd like to get your opinion. If you have any idea on how we can bring business KPIs in our reports, if there is a process, and by discussing with Luca Forni from Moviri and Akamas, I heard that Luca had plenty of ideas on that theme. So I'd like to ask Luca to start by giving his ideas first. So Luca.
Okay, thank you. Let's say that I will maybe a bit step back to introduce my vision on this topic. So I'd say that there are two main areas of interest where we're talking about business and performance. So in my opinion, from a side, there is the concept of risk reduction. So you do performance test to avoid performance issue in production. And so in that way, if you look at the metrics, you have to look sort back, collecting stats on how you affected the performance test, the quality of your software in the past. So it's really hard if you look at risk, having an idea of how your activity is impacting this release, the release that you are testing is going to work in production. You can rely on your past. So saying, from when I introduced the performance test, from when I have it in my pipeline, my performance incident rate reduced from that to that. I was able, I better understand the system, so it also impacted the mean time to repair, the availability time, and so on. So one side of is the risk. On the other side, it's, let's say, more on something related to revenue, or something like you said about the conversion rate. So this for sure it's a metric. There are a lot of tools in production that give you live data about the conversion rate, and there are even tools that are able to link directly the conversion rate to the revenue that you are doing, let's say, live. So in my opinion, it depends on where your business is focusing and how you're mature about performances. So if you are not so advanced, you are mostly doing regression, and you're looking to avoid issues in production. You can look at this kind of metrics, in my opinion. So knowing how your work is impacting the reliability of your system or the response time of your system in production, because in test it's really hard. If you are more mature in terms of performance, for sure the conversion rate is something that you can use. I guess that we are all of us are aware of the famous stats from Amazon there, where they were able to reduce from less than 100 millisecond response time on a page, and they were able to estimate how this impacted their revenue, but they don't did this live. So they did a test, they measured the impact of the benefit, and then deployed the application in production. And afterwards they were able to say, okay, due to the improvement in response time, we were able to increase our revenue with our online shop. So working live, having something that you do a test, collect a metrics, and say to the business, okay, this will map to that value, It's really hard, in my opinion. As you can say, it's something that maybe you can extrapolate, but my personal opinion is more based on past data. So how what you did in the past affected the production. You can use the same approach, the same score to do some assumption on how what you are doing will behave in the once in production. Because or you are able to do canary, and so it's not strictly talking about performance test. It's not strictly performance test. It's shift right, if kind of different approach. But if you are doing performance test, it's really hard, and this is why we are talking about this topic, having a technical metric that you can sum or multiply with some other metric in your tool set from your tools, and say, okay, this will mean either less cost for a business, less revenue. Okay, maybe just another bit from my side is about the cost. For sure, if you do, instead of increasing the performance, try to optimize your code, especially with the footprint on the infrastructure application. You can have an easy way to measure the impact on business side. So if you're able to run the same services using less memory, less CPU, you can free space in your data center. You can host more application in the same space, and this is quite easy to estimate, because you may know how much will cost for you a single server, how much will cost to manage it. So this is maybe a different approach, a different focus. So instead of doing, let's say, more with the same, is do the same with less, which is a slightly different approach. But in this case, in my opinion, is definitely better to provide some business metric, business value to the performance test, or anyway to the performance engineering space.
I think it reminds me two things. I don't know if you heard about the story about Etsy. Has anyone ever told about it? How they work? So I'm just going to refer it to anyone. So Etsy, they do those blue-green deployments, and every time they do a new release, a new feature, let's say let's package the cost of a product with the shipping, which means it avoids for the end user to get say 10 euros, and then later on you figure out it's 15 euros because you have 15 euros to ship the product. So they said, okay, why don't we package everything in the price directly based on the location of the user by estimating the shipping price. So they did that feature, and then instead of deploying it, they deployed on a small amount of people. They say, I want to just deploy this in California, for example. They take 2-3 days, and they measure if they were getting more money out of that. And if it was, they were deploying everything. So here, it's not related to performance, but it's a way of, okay, so I'm doing a feature. I know it's going to respond properly, but would that feature or that release bring value for my business? And I think, yeah, like you said, Luca, it's very hard. I think, especially I don't like the word extrapolation because it's like, okay, so if I looked at the number of tickets sold for the next Nicolas Cage movie related to the business, then I will make conclusions. So then I start to extrapolate things that has no relationship between each other. So I think that's the big problem. So we should have to be very careful on that point. I think Alexander posted a link on one of his blog. So Alexander, do you have any things to add with related to the blog that you posted? Alexander, we don't hear you. There's your mic is muted probably, or Alexander? Oh yeah, we hear you.
Now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Henrik, are you?
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah, okay. So actually I posted several links. Maybe if you allow me to share screen, I will say a few words about what I posted.
Sure. So let me give me the right so you can share.
It looks like I can do that.
Can share. Yeah, you can share.
Yeah. So interesting that it put it exactly at the place where my browser is. So, okay. So first link it to my post. It is 2016 post where I put together several links to different, say, business related aspects. Most interesting from there, you could find, I think, this one. That is a 2003 paper of Connie Smith and Lloyd Williams discussing business case for software performance engineering, which is a little wider, but they put a lot of efforts here and summarize it good, mentioning different aspects of how performance may impact business, like operational costs, development costs, hardware costs, canceled project, customer relations, lost income, reduced competitiveness. It's pretty big paper. So if somebody wants to find a way, because so far mostly traditional e-commerce was mentioned, and actually we have many more applications where performance could impact business. And then there is a lot of discussion about web performance, how, say, response time impact business. And there is another link to another post discussing some of these aspects. And it is interesting, if originally, long time ago, it was actually in 60s when it started, they discussed, for example, how performance impact productivity of people. So if a system is slow, you just do less things. And now it completely switched to e-business case when you sell something, so performance impacting your customers. And for that, there was a book published by Tammy Everts. Time is Money, a small book, but a good collection of different such cases. And it definitely was somewhere free online. For a long time, it was free on SOSTA's site. As far as we don't have SOSTA anymore, maybe it's somewhere else. And there is one more interesting site, last one that I want to mention, VPO Stat, which is collection of different, say, information related to performance and its impact to the business.
All right. Thanks for sharing the links. So it would be great. I think you have already posted on the chat. We will try to relay those links as well when we notify the community that the PAC meetup happened. It would be great for the community to have those links, because I think it makes total sense. Thanks, Alexander, for that. And I think I agree. If you just look at the transaction per seconds, or how many business case you're able to do, whatever, based on a release, if you do less, basically you're reducing productivity, so it could impact the business directly. But I was more thinking about how could we, I know it's impossible, but I was thinking maybe using an APM product where you can follow also your business metrics as well as a Google Analytics, for example. With your performance, you can start maybe with machine learning or whatever it is, maybe figure out, okay, so with that level of performance, I'm getting this. So now we are here. We should not go on production because we will reduce the numbers of cells or whatever is behind the scenes. So it's very difficult. Jonathan, do you have any idea or any thoughts about what we discussed so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm doing performance at the moment for one of the largest growing fashion retailers in the UK, and we use, which we've talked about before, something called Dark Canary, the kind of combination of dark launching features with Canary rollouts, and we look at performance. Now, we all know if you log into Google Analytics, it tells you Google page speed is built into there. We know that metric's probably not the greatest of and most accurate, but it's an indication of how those page load times have changed over each release. Now, that was something that we were looking at, but partly when we were doing, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, we launched a new user interface. So there was a new menu, navigation menu. And what we did, because the navigation menu was both in the React native mobile app and also the e-commerce website, which is React.js, you know, what we did is we tag a certain type of customer as a VIP, and we use those to test, a bit like Amazon do. We get them to test that piece of functionality, and we capture all sorts of useful metrics around, you know, their experience. And as we started off, what's the bounce rate that's changed? So say, for instance, the payment flow, what we did with the payment flow is we condensed it all onto a single page, so people didn't have to keep on going through each page. And, you know, your previous delivery history, if it was there, would be on the first page. You'd only change it if need be, or your preferred banking card, etc., because each call goes out to Stripes or whatever API, which takes extra time. You know, part of it is we're avoiding doing that by having a single page. But obviously we need to prove that, and we need to prove that hypothesis is actually going to save time and turn into revenue. So we used two things. We used Google Analytics and obviously Firebase for React and native mobile, and then we use Snowflake as the way to connect that data to our CRM platform, so we could directly understand customer behavior of our certain type of customers who had certain techniques. So, you know, there's certain people who were, you know, were flagged as like an active user, that they would buy 3 or 4 items a month, whereas on average, if you look at something like what ASOS, which is another fashion retailer in the UK, posted, that typically a user will only buy 3 items a year. So we got to identify a good mix, and we had to look at the right demographics as well. So we needed to do these kind of testing on a nice spread of our real users, i.e. fitting the right age group, the right gender, etc., to give us a good sample size. And we start off quite small. We'd look at the performance metrics and compare those to what was happening in live and the conversion rates of the new payment platform, whilst running the previous platform still in production. And that really helped us whether to make a decision of to go or not to go. And I think that's kind of what Lucas has kind of talked about as well.
Great, thanks for that. And you mentioned ASOS, and I just looked at Jan, and Jan was like making the face that he knows that's something. I don't know why, but he knows it. That was funny. But Scott, you raised a hand, so you have something to add here.
Yeah, I think one thing we need to be quite careful of is if we're trying to benchmark, say, a cart conversion, you know, someone's going through and adding a whole lot of stuff to their carts and things like that. If we're going to try and benchmark that on performance, particularly if we're doing sort of like a green, blue or A/B deployment or something like that, then the only thing that should change in that deployment that we're testing is code related to performance. You could, for instance, have something which functionally works a lot better and is a lot cleaner functionally, even though that cart conversion process is still relatively slow, but because you're someone old and grumpy like me who likes things really, really simple, you don't notice that slowness because you've saved a lot more of your own time getting things into the cart just by clicking add, checkout, rather than something which the human-based process is a bit more complex, even though it's really, really, really fast. And I tend to be happier with the simple interface, even if it's a bit slower, than the complex interface, even if it's a bit faster.
Yeah, so let me just jump into that kind of quick response. So Stripe's a great example, right? We've all used Stripe APIs. We understand, you know, Apple Pay. What we mentioned and Henrik mentioned about APMs and something like Dynatrace, or I've actually been working on this MIT project with Splunk for Good and Todd DiCaprio, who's another performance a PAC member. And one of the things we've been talking about is, well, we can't get APM data about how it's working from Stripe's perspective. We can't get data because Apple aren't going to share their Apple Pay APIs, but actually we know they use APIs. We know there's some metric that we want to do. So why can't we extend that information out say, for instance, get them to publish it on Kafka, so we can capture that time series data and actually include it in our Grafana or on our Dynatrace flows, so that we can understand the impact. So, for instance, the Stripe one's a great example. By not having, the full page, the payment page, there was a whole stack of calls that we didn't need to make, which again saved us time. And it was a less amount of people were using calling Stripe to get the latest credit card details and all the expiry and everything else, unless they were changing their payment. So by changing that behavior, we're reducing, a bit like CDN really, we're reducing the amount of hops that were going externally, because obviously looking at our own APM landscape and going, everything's good, and the APIs are coming back at super times, we can't extract that out to third parties. And I think upstream and downstream systems are going to be where we start trying to get, and I know, people like Andy have talked about this before, about this kind of open testing API, where people share data about how their systems are performing if you rely on that technology. And I think that's a really interesting point to kind of try and push into the industry.
Another thing as well, and I don't know how many other people on the panel or listening in have hit this issue, that we're talking about data quite a lot, like who has what data, what's currently happening in production, do we have an APM and things like that. When we're talking about this sort of thing with organizations that don't have competitors, so like public sector and things like that, this conversation still happens. One of the really interesting thing about that is they have the data going all the way back from the beginning of time, basically. But as the performance guy, the tricky thing is actually getting hold of that data. And often what I find is either I'm not going to give it to you because you won't understand it. I'm not going to give it to you because there's gigabytes of it, and because I can't do it in Excel, therefore it's impossible to do anything with, or it fluctuates between those two things. So we had an issue with a former client who shall remain nameless, but everybody has to use, where every time a certain legislative process happened each year, you got spikes in load. Now, they were collecting all of the data, people who were logging in, people whose sessions were dropped, people who couldn't log in and things like that. And this organization swore up, down, left, right, black and blue, that the login was only taking 3 seconds. And on average, it was only taking 3 seconds. It's just that they were averaging over 10 minutes. Now, their Facebook feed was going nuts from clients saying, I can't log in and I have to do this today or I'm going to get a penalty. And then on the other side, you've got the internal systems guy saying, well, we don't understand why all these people are complaining because it's only taking 2.5 seconds. So there's a bit of a schism there with having the data either confirmed or rejected from an alternate source. In this case, it was Facebook and Twitter and their own contact center, and then trying to bring that stuff together. And it becomes very interesting when there's someone with no competitor who doesn't necessarily have a motivator to try and make things better, short of having people complain. It's an interesting conundrum to be in, but I'll hand back over.
So Leandro, you raised your hands.
I wanted to add as well to all what has been mentioned regarding having data, having enough information. It's always a very true struggle that organizations go through trying to prove wrong. It's most of the time is one team says it's taking half a second, the other team is saying I cannot even log or process things, where those type of situations as a starting point for what we've done in some other experiences is to gather the proof or the complaints and act on them. And as many are mentioning, these data needs are usually the requirements to prove something. Many times we go even before to left to check with management, check with product owners, the leads, and specify, hey, we have these processes that are important to last this, not longer than this. That's a key metric that we should support because these, and these reasons. Those reasons usually are not so much regarding data specifically, but I think a big departure point is to make management aware. As usual, a good language is the language of currency and money losses, where right away we can go Chicken Little with money losses, proving them that customers that won't be able to do anything on our site won't ever come back, that our sales will decrease because our customers won't be able to purchase, or Ticketmaster when they cannot even sell them. But I think that one is a little bit too much, used too much, a little bit wasted. Another one that we can argue or we can present to management is productivity, not necessarily toward customers, but the internal applications of our organization. If our users, the employees, cannot work on it, hate it because it's slow, avoid it, those type of impacts are the ones that we can right away point out to management. Hey, if the people, I don't know, in the warehouse can scan items really quickly and have it balanced in time, avoid them sitting there or standing there. It might be 2 seconds that they are waiting longer, but prove the impact on productivity. And eventually that translates in money, but you could use a productivity catch to make it important. And after you have the attention of management, as many say, you can use data, you can use graphs and metrics to make it visible. Some of these graphs could even include, similar to AWS, the money burnout of your application, when if you have a system that is hogging resources, you will see them being pricier in AWS. Systems that are not well tuned or performing poorly, but you don't notice it. And eventually the AWS electricity bill, I used to call it, comes. And that's when the organization are like, whoa, what happened here? And then you can say, hey, hate to say I told you so, this is important, this is why this, and that. I think the first step is to get management's ear to pay attention to you. And usually optimizing productivity, helping people to like your environments, and money, plain money, are good starting points where you can easily prove how many impacts and on how many places poor performance, poor metrics can impact and bring undesirable outcomes, especially for management.
Andrea, and I think Ganesh wants to add something as well. So Andrea, you raised the hand several times. So you want to say something? We don't hear you.
Yes, because I am triple muted. Too many noise here. So I'll start actually with a question. So let's start considering what is a business driver. So for me, whenever we work at business driver level, it means that is a dimension that a C-level is able to understand. Okay, so it's not number of visitor, it's not, maybe conversion may work, it's definitely not number of page visit or so on. So it's more like a number of orders or total revenue from the website, for example. So the question that I have, first of all, is how many of you, in your experience, has ever had access to this data at the same resolution of your testing?
Should I bullshit or should I say the truth?
No, and then I go to why I asked this question. So my experience is that it is extremely, extremely, extremely rare to have this information. So we have to distinguish when we say business driver from justify why I'm doing a performance test, communicate to management why performance test is important, define why the investment is necessary or why a specific change may impact the business, versus the metrics that we used to run the test, or the metrics that we use to validate if the test is successful or not. So personally, what generally happens is that from a performance engineering perspective, we always work at a lower level, number of page visits, but it's part of our way to communicate outside the test to translate that in what actually are the impact on the business. And if we are able to do that, then becomes a different conversation that you have with your customer, if you're a consultant, or your internal customer. So the big difference between someone that does performance engineering from an expertise perspective, is able not only to run the test, but to understand what is the impact of any issues happening on the test. So it is far having, of course, the heaven, the nirvana will be having everything in one single dashboard that immediately show from the business driver level down to the single transaction happening. Down the road, that is not possible. This is my experience. So be able to do that translation comes from experience, but also comes from building and approaching the problem in the proper way with a business case. What the basically means is that when I start the activity to this performance test, I know where I want to go. And then I have to work all my performance engineering steps in order to solve that specific business case, which give me the business driver that I have to present to management. That is how I would probably approach the problem.
So Ganesh, you wanted to add something a few minutes ago. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. So thank you. So, why this question happened to my mind. So basically, I worked for 15 years in performance engineering. So I've seen the decade-old the waterfall days as well as the recent DevOps days. So basically, the challenges challenges we face while talking to the project manager, for example. So what typically they think, I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but it happened to me that project managers have some kind of a thumb rule that, when I get 100% budget from the sponsors, 70% goes to development and 30% goes to functional testing or something, and performance maybe to 5% or something. So that's kind of the thumb rule they used to have earlier. So and my challenge was, how can I convince the project sponsors that my efforts are worth investing on, and how can I convince them to involve me into their project early on in the development cycle, and give us the fair budget to do, to make a real difference rather than just doing the testing for the sake of it. Okay. So that's my problem, how can we make sure that the business sponsors are understanding our value, and then it goes other way around, right? So we need to give them real metrics and convince them that if you don't do the performance testing, this much is the risk to our business or application. So I was just thinking about how can we achieve it, and there are two things actually. One thing is to know our how much our efforts are worth. We need to know how much application itself is worth. So there is one point, that is application value analysis. And in this application value assessment, we need to understand how much application itself is worth for the business, for its uptime, like per hour or per minute uptime, and how much is the cost of application downtime. May it be planned or unplanned downtime, but we need to come up with that figure, that how much application is worth for the business. And now when we get to that figure, and then we know that these are the application risk factors. For example, there are regulatory risk. For example, if the deadline is missed, the company will be fined. If there is a reputation risk, because you will tend to lose your customers to your competition. So there is application value as well as there is application risk. So my question to larger panel is, how can we come up with the meaningful metrics? Those can be monitored via complicated observability systems that we have, like Dynatrace, AppDynamics, or Elasticsearch, or whatever. So we can even have our own custom metrics pushed into those systems, and then we do some kind of a deep dive analysis using those technical and business metrics. Just to give an example, like we have a cart which is abandoned. We know it is abandoned, but we need to know why it is abandoned. It may be that customer may have changed his mind, may not be performance reason, but we need to go deep down into see, you know, if at that time there was any performance issue, and if the cart is abandoned, how much revenue is lost. So we have to go into the cart and see how much the products are worth, and then how much revenue is lost, and we have to then correlate back to the technical metrics. So these kind of deep dive analysis, I guess that the current technical stacks can do it.
Yeah, that's a big, a big question for sure. So I know that Jan, you post something on the chat and you raised your hand several times before. So Jan, do you have any answers to what Ganesh just mentioned?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion so far. It all comes down to building a justification to do performance testing, doesn't it? It's an old chestnut that's been around for a long time. And I agree with what Ganesh has been saying, that, you know, that you get an absolute fraction of the budget to do any sort of even non-functional testing. And even then, so it used to be, well, why do we need to do this? What's the justification for it? You've got to put money, you've got to put some value around doing it, because that's what the business understands. Yeah, the C-level, they're interested in money. Yeah, if you can demonstrate, well, reputation, if you can demonstrate that there is a significant risk by not doing performance testing that will cost the business money and reputation, they're going to be interested, aren't they? And anything other than that, it's a hard slog. Yeah, as you say, Ganesh, technical metrics, they don't mean an awful lot to people up the food chain. There are exceptions. I've run across some very technically competent people at C-level, but I think they're rare in companies, to be honest. So it all comes down to justification. I think that's still the case. You'll still get the, well, yes, we need to do performance testing. Okay, fine. We'll do it at some point at this level. But what is that? What is that telling the business? There's got to be some justification around it. And you've always got to build a business case to deliver performance testing, which sounds a bit ironic, but it often has worked out that way. I've lost count number of times people say, why do we need to do performance testing? We'll just do a quick system test and all will be well. Well, actually, no, sorry, hello, the world doesn't work like that. And the huge risk of, as we all know, of not doing this properly and effectively and with right metrics and the right outcomes is huge. It's still a problem that's there, but it all comes back to providing a meaningful justification to the business why you need to consider performance such an important factor. It differs a little bit on the silo your business is in. If you're an e-commerce business, obviously poor performance means you won't sell as much. Okay, that's fairly clear monetization. You can do that correlation. For other types of business, it's perhaps more difficult. Banks, other types of financial institutions, it's probably leaning more on kudos. I think we've seen with this COVID-19 impact, the number of companies where they've lost their call centers for a long time. So their online load goes up massively. And then a lot of their systems start to creak because of that, because they've never built in or thought about that sort of scenario. And that's hurting a lot of companies at the moment, which is quite good for us performance consultants. But it's a symptom of that a lot of businesses, their IT systems don't have necessarily a lot of resilience in them in terms of their ability to scale. So just some thoughts there.
Yes, Alexander is raising the hand. Leandro, you were raised your hand before. You want to add here, or should I pass it to Alexander? Okay, go ahead, Leandro.
Yeah, no, to what was Ganesh's question and adding a little bit to what Andrea mentioned, I like a lot the business drivers language to be the first steps that you start to learn and understand what is important business-wise for your management, for your PM, for your C-level people in the organization. I think what you are looking for a little bit like just a graph and a set of metrics that you can directly present to the decision-making people in your organization as many mentioned, there are very well technically versed people, individuals in organizations usually that can look at a throughput graph and totally translate it into sales or money. But most of the time, I think that's a skill that the performance engineer more or less needs to develop to be able to first learn these business drivers, learn these terms that are important for management in terms of the application that they're doing. Even if it's this go to production date that I have, these metrics, the 5% of budget that is being given to me, you need to be able to explain this is why this is important in terms or impacting your business drivers, what is important to you as a C-level person. So I would say, and totally, I do agree, it's like another complete different language for many of us technical people that we have to start to think on revenues, productivity, reaching numbers, SLAs, but not the SLAs that we're used to. And we need to be able to translate all those into why it is important. Why should you, C-level person that has never ever thought about performance, should think about it? More or less, what would be the impact? And a little, the problems that you're going to start having sound a little bit like the exercise at the end of a load test, where you should be able to explain also to management how is it important to be careful with performance at every step of the life cycle of the project, on every environment, on every level, and be attacking them. And especially, that's a very good sales pitch, showing them the earlier that you detect a problem and fix it, the cheaper, the fastest, the more efficient, less problems you will have, and not leave everything until the end for front-end load tests, as was a traditional. And this is another type of metric that you can explain to management, where showing them how wasteful is it in terms of the benefit from performance that you will get if you only hammer systems through front-end automations and load tests, rather than doing the previous steps, why it is important, how it will impact those business metrics. And I would say, make sure that you at the very beginning learn the language that is important for management, and present all your information in those terms. Never ever go to throughput metrics, milliseconds, load balancers, things like that. You will lose management right there and then. So make sure that you speak as much as possible in terms of business or what is important, as Andrea mentioned. And hopefully that way, in my experience, you get better results rather than throwing technical mumbo jumbo to the C-level. It's totally another language. You will lose them right away.
Yeah, but it's always nice to do a mumbo jumbo in front of the management. It's always great.
Well, you can lift up your shirt like, yeah, I'm the engineer, technical, which blah 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 blah.
You look at my face. Do you think I'm businessman? No. So Alexander, you want to say something?
Yes. So actually, we discussing different problems here. At the beginning, we started that how performance impact business. It is one problem. Another, why we need to do performance testing. It is not the same thing. For example, the Etsy you mentioned in the beginning, which was a poster child of web performance, they didn't practically do any performance testing. I had quite a few discussions here on different New York events with them. They told that they don't see any reason to performance testing. They follow it in production. If something, they roll back, and performance testing is too complicated and not give good information. So when we talk about performance testing, that is a proactive way to mitigate performance risk. So we are talking that we could prevent some downtime or maybe getting that bad performance in production for some time. So we're talking about that. So ideally, I believe that it should be holistic view of performance. So first you convince management that performance is important and it impacts business, and then you decide what you need to do to deliver that performance, what should be done in development, what should done with performance testing, what should be done in production. But I haven't seen that much.
I mean, yeah, Alexander, I agree with you. We started with one topic and we go to another one. So everything that relates with the business comes in this discussion at the moment. It's pretty weird. But I think, yeah, I think why we should do load. We know that performance impact business, large. We can select. I would call it unicorn companies. They don't even do load testing because they think it's expensive. Or I heard many people saying I don't do load and performance testing because it doesn't reflect how my system is behaving in production. So to that I would say, yeah, but maybe you're not doing the right tests that reflects reality. But that's very hard to explain. But yeah, I think I mean we all agree. If we ship bad application, bad code, bad architecture, we will have bad response time, bad user experience, and that would definitely have an impact to the business. I mean, just looking at my kids or my wife, if something is not responding, she's get pissed off. So and I'm also doing that for sure. But I think I was thinking when Jonathan was explaining things, and also Alejandro, and I thought, hey, I know that lots of us to show how a customer's website is behaving, we do some sort of benchmarking. We look at the website, but we also look at the other competition. Or maybe, let's say I'm going to look at your neighbors, how he is responding, and then you show the numbers. Say, hey, look, this is your website, and this is the website of your neighbor, and look, it's much better. It responds pretty fast. So I think we do that for more like a pre-sales approach to make the customer understanding that their competition is much better and they're losing money and blah, blah, blah. So why don't we do the same approach, saying, oh, this is your release. And by the way, if you ship that, you're still bad. You're still not at the level that people expect. So, I mean, I know we want to bring business KPI, but I think, I mean, maybe there is a secret sauce, or there is a magic spell to send to our reports to get the dollars showing in our reports. But I think it's from my understanding from the discussion we had, we need to extrapolate, and extrapolation is dangerous from my perspective sometimes. So why don't we just compare? Why don't we say, hey, Amazon, you want to ship that? Look, the local French shop close to the corner here, he has a better response times. Are you willing to go to production even if he has a better website? Yes or no? So I don't know. What's your thought about that, Jonathan?
I've just got one quick one, which is kind of, one of the reasons I definitely wanted to reach out here is about actually saving lives, performance saving lives. So I mentioned before about the MIT project, and I wanted to do a call for action. I've literally spent the last 4 days working, non-stop with the Neoload products and the team at MIT to roll out a COVID SafePass mobile app, which is going live in a couple of days' time, which is designed to save lives. So, we're looking at not like the NHS in the UK, which are also I've been talking to as well around performance and scalability, but this app's going to go out and it's going to go to hundreds of millions of people. And they're looking for volunteers who could help them with the rollout and performance. So all you need to do is contact me at help@coronavirus.fo. All of us are volunteers here, and what we're doing is actually going to save lives. So when you talk about talking to stakeholders, I spoke to the founder today at MIT, and she's talking about the fact that they've got medical institutions in different countries are all going to have to take this GPS data, which we're sending from phones, through contact tracing. And we're going to, the work that I've been doing with Todd DiCaprio and Splunk for Good, they're donating their engineers to visualize different regions and how people are sending their information for those people who are infected, for those people who, want to go and critical frontline staff and needs an app which is monitoring them using the new Bluetooth technology from both Apple and Google to actually make sure that they don't interact with people's. But obviously from our point of view, we're having to upload huge amounts of JSON payloads with, all that historical data of where you've been for the last 14 days. And that information needs to be able to be sanitized and getting into that data source. So it's a big challenge. It needs the Performance Advisory Council on it. It needs anybody who's a volunteer. You can get involved. You can jump on Slack if you go to covidsafepaths.mit.edu. You can literally go on there, register. You'll be on the Slack channel. You'll be able to talk to the devs. You'll be able to talk to the testers. We're setting up a team now to do performance with using the Neoload tool. So, go out and save lives. So, and that will be an interesting new metric.
Okay, so could you push the link to the chat for all the attendees so everyone is aware of that? Thanks for that. I think let's work closely together so we can help institutions or governments who wants to save life and avoid this virus to spread out and kill more people. All right, so Ganesh, you raised the hand. You want to add something about our today's topic?
Oh, maybe I forgot to lower my hand, but yeah, I'm kind of happy that the discussion is well discussed and the topic is well discussed, and we got some answers as well.
All right, so I'm looking at the time. I promised you guys that we will do that our meetup in an hour, and I'm looking at the time and say, shish, I didn't respect my engagements. So it's all on my hands. I'm sorry, guys. So let's start the conclusion. So I want to finish in 1 hour because we will start the conclusion. And before we start the conclusion, I just want to remind you to all of you, if you didn't submit your theme, it's the right moment to do that. You have a few minutes to submit your topic that you would like to discuss next week because there is a 50 euros Amazon gift cards to win. So if you want to win 50 euros, please submit your theme. All right, so we are going to start the conclusion, and I'm going to ask each of our PAC members and experts to have their final thoughts about our discussion. So I will start with Luca. Luca, you're muted.
Yep, here I am. Sorry, mute. Let's say that okay, it's a colleague of mine, but I really appreciate the approach suggested by Andrea. So it's not marketing from over here. It's just that I like what he said. I mean, put the business first and make them drive what's meaningful for them. If you do this approach, keep it as your guide in everything you do, it will be definitely easier to report back to them, because everything has been done for a reason. It should be a business reason, because if you lost all your time on technical stuff that is not relevant for the business, at the end you're wasting your time. So I would say that we can all agree that it's not so easy to translate technical metrics in business, but it could be having the business goal as your key point in mind could definitely help to be able to talk with them and help them to understand what you're doing and the reason behind them.
Okay, so if you're saying the number of pods running on the Kubernetes cluster, is it a business KPI or is it not? Okay. Scott, what's your thoughts?
I think from my experience, it's always being able to start from the top when you're talking to the PMs or business or whoever they are and say, so what is the impact to you if this bit breaks at the worst possible time? And often they'll say something along the lines, well, it's going to cripple us, and then say, we can work together to try and find out where that point is to see whether you're going to be happy with it, and if not, then we can all pull together and try and get you a better outcome.
Great note. Thanks for that. Alan, we don't hear you much tonight. So Alan, what's your thoughts about what we discussed so far?
Thanks, Henrik. I'm becoming aware that there's some kind of hand up button that I'm supposed to press, or you're supposed to just wave my hand.
You can just raise your hand like this.
I tried to do it a few times. Sorry, you'd guess you didn't see.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, so I think I'm on the same page as Luca and the other guys in that you've got to try to make the business aware of it and definitely speak in their terms. The difficulty, I think, is making it tangible. I don't think generally the problem with QA and performance over the years is avoiding a risk is not good enough, because we can do a load of stuff and then say to the customer, yeah, I avoided all these risks for you, but they're like, how can you prove that? If you happen to work in retail or so on, where you can actually track the conversions, then it's really happy time. So you can trace that now, where we couldn't do that very easily 1 or 2 decades back. But I think that even if you're not there and you're working in banking or something like I am, you can try to, if you really work at it, there is a way of getting tangible things out of this. Some of them have been mentioned already, but I think maybe one thing that wasn't mentioned that we try and look at is the impact on the life cycle overall. For example, just increasing the time to market, allowing the whole projects to move faster and be more agile, reducing the time spent investigating production issues and so on. And whatever it is, I think almost every project has something that you can track. Whether a couple of times it's been mentioned, optimizing the amount you're spending on the cloud resources, for example. Whatever it is on your project, if you work, you can find that thing and start gathering those metrics. It could be, for example, just the number of performance defects that are getting raised. You track these things over time, that can have a big effect on persuading the business that it's doing something good, especially if you can turn that back to their terms. One time we tested a data center migration before and after, and the latency was increased in the data center they wanted to move to. So we said, well, the response times are going to increase by about 20% if you migrate to this data center. And the CIO, you can see him thinking, well, that sounds pretty bad, but we can get by, we'll get by with that. And then I said, well, we've done some further analysis, and modeling on, and if you want to handle the same volume of calls, you're going to have to hire another 30 staff to do this. And you could see his face like, 30 staff? Are you kidding me? Like an electric shock. So in other words, just make it tangible for the customer. I guess that was my conclusion.
Communication is the key. So Jonathan, what's your thoughts? Conclusion thoughts?
Yeah, no, I recorded a podcast today with a guy called Mike Harris, who's on the ISO committee with me, and he works for a company called Gecko Board. And I don't know if anyone's seen it before, but it measures the exec scorecard kind of KPIs. So things like revenue, things like support rates, all that kind of stuff. So check something like that out, because that's, I think, the golden goose, what we're looking for. And, maybe, the cascading KPIs is something we need to be thinking, but starting from the business downwards. So yeah, top down approach makes a lot of sense. So, but I agree with Alan as well. I think, even something on that dashboard, which says how much you've saved on Amazon, by improving, the performance of the code, is makes a lot of sense for CIOs and CTOs.
Andrea, what's your business view on this?
So my perspective is that as any other activity, above all, performance engineering has always have to ask himself the so what, meaning that every time that you do something, you always have to ask yourself, so what? Why that improvement? Why that error impact the business? So if you want to have that translation from technical terms to business aware terms, you need to be able to answer back to the so what question.
Makes sense. I know a jazz song, Miles Davis. If you can listen to that, probably you will probably answer your question. Alexander, what's your thoughts? You're muted. Yeah, Alexander, we don't hear you. Nope, still no. Okay, so while Alexander is fixing his sound, Jan, could you conclude, and then we'll pass it back to Alexander. Jan? Oh, same thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
here we
Alexander.
go. Right. Yeah,
Okay.
can you hear me now? Sorry, guys.
Sorry,
Yeah.
and not sure what is going on here. So I just want to remind that with cloud, resources are real money. So we didn't mention it before, but actually, if you could save some CPU resources or other kind of resources, now it is just pure money. And it's interesting that there is new movement, FinOps, that just trying to say save on operations. And I had interesting discussion in somewhere on LinkedIn when I tried to get into discussion and say that the main benefits would be if you improve performance and you could get really big saving. But looks like this FinOps people even didn't get what I am talking about.
That's true. I think it's not business, but it's the cost. That's yeah, indirectly related to business for sure. So Jan, what's your part? Jan, we don't hear you. 2 seconds. Okay, so maybe while you're fixing your...
Sorry. Yeah, just very quick. I haven't got too much to add. I think I agree. Top down, you've got to go in. There's got to be justification, demonstrable, tangible justification for why companies should adopt or carry out performance testing, performance engineering. I mean, it comes down to, obviously, we talked about many times, putting a money value on benefits, also quality, as Alan alluded to. The benefits of a performance, efficient performance approach to performance assurance, I'll call it that. Ideally, it's going to improve the quality of what you deliver with all the benefits that knock on from that. But it's still a challenge. Is in e-commerce, it's easy to put a money value on being able to get more conversions. In other industries like banking, maybe it's more availability. So if I want to get and look at my bank account, if it takes a bit longer, I'm perhaps less concerned. Some companies think they may have a captive customer base. I think that's a dangerous position to adopt. But so I would agree with the pretty much the consensus of what we've been talking about. It's demonstrating tangible value to the client of doing performance testing and other performance disciplines.
Okay. Leandro, Señor Performo.
Well, I might repeat myself a little bit, but make sure that for all these type of metrics, and when you are explaining the importance of performance testing and assurance and optimization, to try to speak management in terms, be very insistent, try to be outsmart the management with your explanations, because even sometimes when it's visible, completely aware why performance should be important, why should you prepare for huge loads, we keep hearing all the time on crucial systems that they go down. The latest that I can remember, a big one, the Iowa caucuses, where evidently there was going to be a huge amount of people coming, huge impact, not only monetary, but as well with your honor, how well it is, how good are you. The company that did that project went down completely, I guess, hope, I don't know. So many impacts, not only monetary, not only productivity, your brand, your recognition, many other type of things that you need to be careful. You don't want to be known as the slow side on the internet. You don't want to be known as the company that did not pay attention, that was willing to risk it, or just plainly hired your son's classmate to do the application or things like that. So make sure that you can explain to management, not so much from the metrics, gather the metrics, translate them, and make sure to deliver the message to generate the awareness of the importance.
Yeah, and if you're facing big crash, there will be a big potential that you'll be part of the news of the dam. So if you don't want to be part of the news of a dam and talk about your website, make sure you're delivering the right performance and the right KPIs.
I would say that's the digital walk of shame. Any times that you're on the news of the dam is equivalent for that.
That's true. Ganesh, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. So I'm very happy that this topic is discussed very detailed, and definitely, if we are able to gather the relevant metrics from the business as well, and then somehow correlate the technical metrics and showcase to the business the value that we are giving, then that will be really easy life for us going forward. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'd like to add also one thing from all what has been added so far. I think first of all, if we want to have a business indicators, if you don't have anything that observe or collect data from the behavior of your production, it will be very hard to get those numbers out of your hat. So at least to start to bring business metrics, make sure that you have things that monitor and collect things. I think that's the good start. And I think from everything that has been mentioned so far, yes, going from the top level back to the technical is the good approach. And I will also remind that why don't we push websites, I mean, at least for the retailer market, because the other one will be more difficult. But why don't we push and that will be putting pressure for companies, their current performance level of each of the websites. So then we can say, hey, look, this is your website, and look, your competitor is here. I think that could be a way also to make understand that they are, if they want to make some bigger numbers, they should at least be better than their competition for sure. All right, so I think I didn't respect the challenge today, so that's my fault. I won't be the one that paid the 50 euros Amazon gift cards for sure. And this is, I will let Stefan put his credit cards to pay that. So Stefan, prepare your credit cards. You're going to warm up soon. Someone is going to be selected and he will win 50 euros. So if you didn't submit your paper, push it right now because you have a few minutes to do that. Small things for PAC meetup number 5. I don't know if you heard all the recent news about Zoom and all the things that goes to China. So I told my company that I don't care if the China government is listening to the PAC. It would be great to have them on board. So I would basically prefer to have Zoom. We use Zoom, so the government could be, the Chinese government could be part of our podcast and meetup. That would be awesome. But we have to also understand the constraints that of each of the different companies that put restrictions on that. So next week, keep in mind that we won't use Zoom, so we'll probably use GoToWebinar. So don't be surprised if you receive another type of link. We will do that because we don't want to have the Chinese government speaking to our meetup. All right, thanks a lot for your time. Thanks for your wake up so early, Scott, as usual. Thanks for everyone to be connected. And remember, we will try to push the links that Alexander has posted this at the beginning of the blog. We will also promote the initiative that Jonathan is doing. So if you want to be part of the project, please notify yourself. It would be great to save people. Thanks a lot. Stay home, stay safe, and see you next Wednesday. See you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Adios.
Adios.
See ya.